I watched Claire fall apart in slow motion. She had always been the woman with laughter tucked behind her eyes and ideas pouring from her hands. But when the company she had dedicated 10 years to shut its doors without warning, something in her crumbled. She didn't say much at first, just sat at the window longer each day staring at the garden below, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold in what was already slipping away. Then came the silence from her partner, a few distant conversations, and eventually a goodbye note left on the kitchen counter. Claire didn't cry that day. She didn't cry at all, which scared me more than anything. She simply folded the note in half and placed it in a drawer. It was like the world had pressed mute on her spirit. The worst came 2 weeks later, when her mother passed unexpectedly from a stroke. Her mother had been her anchor, the one who reminded her she was strong, creative, and worthy. Losing her felt like the ground itself gave way. After that, Claire stopped painting, stopped eating regularly, stopped talking to her friends. Her apartment, once filled with color and light, dimmed into quiet shadows and unopened curtains. She told me one night, her voice flat and low, that she felt like a ghost walking through her own life, like her hands were still moving, but nothing inside her was truly awake. Every day felt the same, empty and heavy. She was living, yes, but only technically. Grief clung to her like winter air, cold and constant, and the thoughts in her head weren't kind. She began to believe she was the reason everything had gone wrong, that maybe she wasn't built for happiness after all. Sometimes she would whisper apologies to no one in particular, for not being stronger, for not seeing the signs, for being a burden. These were not the words of the Claire I had known. They were the echoes of someone lost inside her own storm. One morning, after another sleepless night, she looked at herself in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Hollow eyes, clenched jaw, skin pale from weeks of staying indoors. That moment, she later said, felt like hitting the bottom of a deep well. And yet, somewhere in that stillness, something small stirred. Not hope exactly, but maybe the memory of it. It was faint, but it was there. That was when she first noticed the sound of birds outside her window, and for the first time in months, she opened the curtain just enough to see where it was coming from. That's when she saw her neighbor, Mrs. Adeline, tending to her small but blooming garden, humming softly to herself. Claire stood there, still as stone, watching her, and I like to believe that something passed between them in that quiet, something warm, something human, something like a beginning. Claire didn't knock on Mrs. Adeline's door right away. At first, she just watched her, every morning, at the same time, like clockwork. The old woman would water her plants, trim the edges, hum little songs that only she seemed to know. She moved slowly but deliberately, as though every gesture mattered. It fascinated Claire, this rhythm, this quiet purpose. Then one afternoon, Mrs. Adeline waved, just a soft flick of the wrist and a kind smile. Claire felt awkward returning it, but something about that simple moment stayed with her. The next day, she found herself standing at the edge of the yard, unsure of why she had come. Adeline looked up and smiled again. "Would you mind helping me with this lavender?" she asked gently, handing Claire a small pair of shears. It was so ordinary, so simple, that Claire didn't even think to refuse. That became the beginning. Each morning, Claire would come by, and Adeline would hand her a task. Pruning, repotting, watering. She rarely spoke in long sentences, just small, thoughtful phrases, like, "Roots grow better when they struggle a bit," or "Some plants bloom later, but that doesn't make them any less beautiful." Claire didn't respond much at first, but she began to breathe differently. She noticed the scent of soil, the warmth of sunlight on her skin, the way a flower turned itself toward the light, no matter how crooked the stem. It was all so quiet, but in that quiet, her mind began to soften. She cried once over a broken pot, not because the pot mattered, but because something in her cracked open. Adeline said nothing, just placed a hand gently on her back and let the silence hold space. That was the day Claire realized healing didn't have to roar. Sometimes it whispers. Weeks passed. Claire started sketching again. First a leaf, then a bloom, then a full scene. Her hands remembered how to move with purpose. Her heart, still tender, began to beat with the rhythm of possibility. Adeline, in her own way, guided her without ever saying she was doing so. One day she said, "When the soil is dark and rich, it means it's ready for something new to grow." Claire looked at her and realized they weren't talking about gardening anymore. Months later, Claire stood before a group of children at the community center, teaching them how to mix colors with their fingers. She told them, "You can always start again, even if everything feels ruined. Just take one small step, one thought, one breath." At home, a canvas hung proudly above her desk. It showed a single flower rising from cracked earth, its petals open wide to the sun. In the corner, a single word written in soft gold paint: Radiance. She didn't need the past to disappear. She had grown around it, through it, just like the garden that had once pulled her from the depths. Sometimes, the smallest acts, watering a plant, sharing a smile, noticing the light, can lead us back to ourselves. Claire's journey wasn't about grand gestures. It was about choosing hope, one moment at a time, until the weight of sorrow made room for growth. Her story is a quiet reminder. Even in our darkest seasons, something within us still reaches for the sun. And maybe that's enough to begin again. If Claire's story touched you, share it with someone who needs a little light today. Like, comment, and subscribe to the tales we share for more stories that speak to the heart.